So here's a notification of that recording. If you don't want to be on the recording, you can feel free to turn your video off, keep yourself muted, and you won't show up at all. Otherwise, your participation this evening will be a part of the recording. We're recording it really for the primary purpose of being able to distribute this recording to people who are not able to attend this evening. So we'll be posting this on the town website, making it available so we can hopefully expand our reach and audience for this study and get as many people involved as possible. So happy to have you here live with us, and happy to have you if you're watching this as a recording later on as well. As we're moving along, you will have some moments of engagement. We ask if you're not speaking to try to keep yourself muted, just so that we don't have any audio issues. Please do engage with us during the comment or question periods. You can use the raise your hand function, or just do it the old-fashioned way if you're on video and raise your hand into your video square there. And you can also use the chat if you'd like to add in a few comments along the way. And the other thing we're using throughout this meeting are a few interactive Zoom polls. So those will pop up on the screen when we get to those moments, and then we ask you to engage with those polls as well. So that'll be a big part of our meeting. For those of you watching this as a recording, we also are putting those same polling questions together as an interactive survey, which will be posted online as a link on the town's website. So you'll be able to engage with the information and give us your feedback in the same manner through that survey. I've given a little bit of introductions, but let's start off there. So we have Brian, your town planner, who's here with us this evening, and the planning board, quite a few planning board members as well. And the planning board is hosting and funding this study, and has again hired the Metropolitan Area Planning Council to help facilitate, lead the effort, and guide the conversation through this community-based process. And we thank all of you for being a part of it, and particularly the planning board members and your town planner. Our agenda for this evening, after this brief welcome and introduction, that will include you all and the audience with the Zoom poll in a moment. We'll give a brief introduction to the study, what this is all about, kind of laying the background so that we can have a productive conversation. And then get into a little bit of analysis on the Holton Cross Street area in terms of what the makeup of the area is, some planning analysis in terms of the land use, the types of businesses that are there, and that type of thing. What we're really focused on this evening is opening a conversation with you all in the community to begin to define a vision for this Holton Cross Street area and think about what its future might want to be. And you have a few guided questions in this session to help understand what your perspectives may be, and hopefully can align all of the feedback we receive in this conversation through a series of vision statements, goals, strategies that will help move this district toward where the community would like to see it in the future. And we'll end with just a couple notes about next steps where this study is headed. So as promised, we do have a few Zoom polls, and the first one is just a brief 2-question poll to have you give a moment to tell us about yourself. So that should pop up on your screen now. And if you wouldn't mind, if you could just select your answers, but it's basically, the first question is, what do you consider your primary relationship to the Holton Cross Street area? So you can select one of those responses: resident of the area, resident of the Winchester, the town in general, resident of the neighboring Woburn city, business owner in the area, property owner in the area, a patron of the area, town meeting member, or some other stakeholder that we didn't fill in there. And then the second is just about your sort of frequency and engagement with this area. Are you there more than once a day? Maybe you live around the area. Are you there multiple times a week, about once a week, multiple times per month, once a month, or maybe you rarely pass through, or you're aware of it and don't frequent it? So we're at about 75% participation currently, so I'll just let you all have another moment. Almost there, 80% now, probably looks good enough. And I think submit button not working for an individual. If you don't mind, if the submit button's not working, you could put that into the chat, or even if you're not comfortable putting it in the public chat, you could private message chat it to me, and I'll put those answers in with the rest. Great, thanks. All right, so I'll end this poll and then share it back so you all can see what I see. So the number one answer in terms of what you consider your primary relationship was a resident of Winchester, the town in general, at 47%, followed closely thereafter by a resident of the area, the Holton Cross Street area. And then a patron of the area and town meeting member also got a few votes. And then frequency, it looks like most people are visiting more than once per day, or perhaps live in the area, as suggested by the first question. And multiple times per week and multiple times per month follow that, and about once per month after that. Not too many people are rarely or about once a week. All right, so thank you for giving us a feel for who is out there in the audience. It's great to see people who have likely a nice familiarity with the area, and that will really benefit this study and conversation. So it's good to have you along with us this evening. So if you're wondering what this is about, so the town of Winchester completed a master plan in 2020, and that master plan had several areas identified for further study and action. Nestled within the overall vision in the master plan of balancing development with preservation, there was a goal, A1, which was stated as encourage more commercial mixed use and compact development in areas that support economic vibrancy, including strategic redevelopment parcels in town center and the identified evolving opportunity areas. And this Holton Cross Street area was identified as one of those evolving opportunity areas. So you can see here a page from the master plan, which identifies the strategy to collaborate with neighborhood residents to create an area plan for the Holton Cross Street area. And that's what this study is. So we're actually following up with a more detailed planning study, looking at the aspects, characteristics, and hopes for this area, and advancing it through this work. So that really this is an implementation effort of the master plan town-wide planning effort, which was concluded a couple years ago. So the town is proactively looking at several areas that were identified as those evolving opportunity areas. Here's a map from the master plan as well, which highlights in the red tones the areas which were considered this Holton Cross Street study area. It's primarily those parcels which are zoned limited industrial today. And you can see the preservation enhancements areas are the tones of purple around those red areas, which would be the surrounding residential parcels and neighborhoods. So really the purpose of this study is really proactively planning for the future success of this area. The overarching objectives, as highlighted in that language that we just showed you from the pages of the master plan, were stated as to increase the value of the non-residential tax base, update zoning that strategically responds to the market and creates a more cohesive neighborhood buffering, and create more predictability and reduce competing forces in this area. So we can build upon this as a baseline, sort of a starting point, and see how this conversation might want to impact and influence this starting point. We've outlined a scope of work and a work plan for this effort, which we've really begun with an existing conditions analysis, which we're sharing portions of that with you this evening. We have also an analysis of the existing zoning in the area, which we're sharing with you this evening. Have started to do some individual focus interviews with area property owners, business owners, stakeholders, and the like. And if any of you know of or are someone who should be interviewed in that regard, we'd be happy to follow up and happy to take your information down in this session, or you could follow up by email afterwards as well. And then this community workshop is the first workshop that we would have in this process, with a second community workshop, which would follow up once the results of this feedback is analyzed and we begin to define in a little more detail recommendations and an overall approach. So as I just mentioned, if you are someone who you think falls into one of these categories of a property owner or a business owner or a tenant a nearby resident, an interested stakeholder, you can feel free to either drop your information in the chat if you're in the meeting now, or you can reach out to me by email. My email address is jfiala@mapc.org, as you see on the screen. So I'd be happy to engage with anyone and do a follow-up conversation if you think that would be worthwhile. So as I mentioned, we're really focused on the organization of parcels as they are in the zoning for the town. You can see that yellow rectangle is where we're focused here as sort of the northeastern, north central edge, lining up with the city of Woburn border there. If we zoom in on that yellow rectangle, this is what we're focused on. Those parcels in the purple tone are the limited light industrial parcels, IL parcels, as they are in the zoning. And you can see them there with the IL-1.0 on top of them. And here you might see them a little bit easier with their parcel identification labels on them. So it's about 48 parcels in total that we're looking at in this study. And those are all within that zoning district. Of course, the surrounding parcels are impacted and have a relationship with those parcels. So we're looking at the area in general, but are really focused on those zoned. There's no, I guess just to clarify, there's no intention with this study to expand or contract that zone. So it's not like we're trying to bring residential parcels into the industrial district or vice versa. We're really focused on the districts as they are today, and then looking at the characteristics of that zone. The history of the district really has been industrial. If you go back to when maps look like they did on the screen, where there was much less going on. This area was north of Winchester Center. It was along the Aberjona River, and there was a series of mills and sort of tanneries and factories up along that area that had some worker housing associated with them, but in many of the areas, what you see as industrial today was actually industrial sort of back to the origins of the town. So it's an interesting area. It's not as if it was something before, but it's been a light industrial part of the town for a long time. You can see a more modern zoning map on the screen now. This was back from 1973. And you can see in this map, the light industrial and industrial areas are a little bit larger than they are today. In fact, the areas highlighted with the red dash and the yellow on the screen there in the upper right corner. So that's similar to the district today, but actually a little larger than it is today. And what has been lost is actually already been carved out a little bit by some of the multiple family residential zones which exist today with multiple family residential on them. And so that is where it's very similar. This is the map from 1987. And this is very similar to the way the district is today, where you see not a fully contiguous district. There's bits and pieces that are not connected to other parts of it. And that's mostly because of that change from the 70s to the 80s in the zoning, which brought in and introduced some of that multiple family residential. And here you can see an overall aerial of the area with some of that residential that I've been mentioning, some of the single family neighborhood which surrounds these parcels, the rail line which goes up through, and then the sort of river and water bodies associated with it. And mostly the single story, larger roofed structures are those which would fall within this district that you see on the aerial. So that's a brief introduction just in terms of the basic logistics of this work. We'll next move into the more technical and analytical analysis of the place itself. But I just wanted to pause here and see if there are any questions, maybe offering the opportunity first for our guests, anyone from the general audience, and then after that we could follow up with any questions from the planning board members themselves, if there's any questions about sort of the logistics or setup of this work.
Excuse me, Josh. There is a question in the chat that I think is related in terms of the process, in terms of how big is the area that we're studying.
Yeah, I do have that. I think on one of the next slides that I will flip to. So maybe let me just see. I'll flip there and back, but that will help you see. So there are 48 parcels in this area, as I mentioned. That's a total acreage of about 37 acres. And the average size of those parcels is just over an acre if you look at the average. And on those parcels, not all of them are occupied by buildings. There's about 40 buildings, and about 16 of those are owner occupied according to the assessor's addresses. So the largest parcel is probably, I don't actually have that noted, but my guess is that it might be a pretty close call, and Thai Logistics would probably be pretty close to one of the largest, which is the large structure right on the rail line at the upper right along the City of Woburn line. Hopefully that helps. Let me skip backwards so we don't get too out of order here. So any other questions about I see one in the chat, a general question. I'll just go ahead and read it while I read it here out loud. The general question is, what is the purpose and goal, since you've said that the industrial zoning won't be changed? Are you trying to increase the harmony between residential and IL? You're looking to change the traffic patterns. Holton intersection is a mess, of course. We're trying to increase transportation options and safety in the area. And I don't understand the purpose. So I think all of those questions are within the scope of this work and something that we're trying to explore. Well, I did mention, so I think the assumption I mentioned is something just to maybe help relieve any concerns, if that was a concern. But if we hear a resounding need from the community to change a zoning boundary, then that's something that could be considered, but we haven't heard that so far in our conversations. I would say what we're trying to open through this work is a moment to reflect with the community members, you all, to hear what is or isn't working in this district, and then to reflect what is or isn't working on the regulations, particularly the zoning bylaw as it relates to these parcels, and see if there's changes or adjustments that could optimize the district relative to issues or challenges or opportunities that people are identifying. So that's the overall purpose. I think some of the more specific items in your chat also indicate fruitful outcomes for this work as well. Any other questions or thoughts? I'll turn over toward the planning board members if there's any other follow-up from you all. All right, so we'll go ahead and keep moving. We'll have more time for discussion and questions as we go. So let's shift, as I previewed with that flip forward, into some of the more technical aspects of the district. So here you can see, just from a few street view images, the overall character of the district. So you do see on the upper left some of the nearby single-family residential areas, which have a nice neighborhood feel. Some of the light industrial areas up on Holton Street, where I think one of the characteristics of that is kind of the bleeding of the public realm street into the private lots with little definition in terms of the curb cuts and the sidewalks, and the sort of the larger parking areas all become one. And the single story larger format structures. So that's a kind of both our hallmark characteristics of what you see on some of these areas. In the lower left, you see Cross Street as you head towards the underpass. And again, a little bit of lack of definition at the frontage of these properties, pavement flowing from sort of one side to the other. And then also Cross Street on the other side of the underpass with a little more definition as you move towards Washington Street. And then a few more on East Street, a little more definition with the front yards and the sidewalks there. And then Lowell Avenue has kind of a character of its own as you pull into that turnaround, and the buildings and sort of structures that are there. And then on River Street, it also has a very similar feel where there's a lot of nose-in parking that works with the street to create a larger paved area, the single-story gabled roof structures with large expanse. And then on Swanton Street, it's a little bit different character. I think there are more recent sidewalk improvements, a couple of newer buildings that have been built there. And then off of that is Chapin Street, and then also McKay Avenue. So this is the overall character, predominantly single story, predominantly does have a light industrial type of feel to it, but there is a closely integrated residential of varying character and types, both single family and multifamily, along some of these streets, like Holton Street and Chapin Street, but then also tucked in and next to each other. So it's a tightly intermingled street.
Recording stopped.
Uh-oh.
Recording in progress.
Okay.
Sorry about that.
Nice. So these a little bit more what we understand from the past documents, primarily the master plan. And these are, again, things that we can confirm in our conversation together, but the town's looking for, in general, increasing value of the non-residential tax base, updating zoning to strategically respond to the market, looking at what that might be through your feedback, but also kind of considerations of what's going on in the market in these types of places in the region and around the Winchester, Woburn area specifically. Supporting and growing the industrial and commercial base, reflecting a consensus based upon what we hear from you all about the type of industrial or other uses which are compatible and appropriate in these locations. What the sentiment is around multifamily, whether it should be allowed, encouraged, not, that's, I think, an open question. And then also the notion of impacts on the existing neighborhoods and how to both reduce and mitigate those impacts. And that includes things that like were raised in the chat, like traffic and specific intersections and walkability and bikeability, those types of approaches. So before we get too much further into the next round of analyses, I did want to do another poll and just get your more sort of what you're bringing to the meeting in terms of your own vision for Holton Cross Street before it gets too colored by things that we might have to say. And that is this next poll is a 4-question poll, so I'll launch that now. And what we're trying to get a feel for here is just what it is that's important or top of mind or the priorities from both you here in the meeting and people who might be following up with this meeting as a recording. So what we see is that the first question is most important. What is the most important aspect of the Holton Cross Street area? You can select all that apply on that question. And if we didn't populate the right answer from your perspective, you can say other and then add your additional thoughts into the chat. That would be very helpful. And then the second question is, what words would you use to describe your ideal vision for the Holton Cross Street area? And again, you can select all the words that we've selected that make sense to you, or you can add additional thoughts into the chat. And then the next is, how close is the Holton Cross Street area compared to the vision that you would like it to be? And then finally, what is missing from the Holton Cross Street area? And for each of those, for that last question, you can select all that apply. For the third question, you can select one of those answers. So answers are coming in now. And just to give people a feel while we're waiting, because I know there's a lot of options there. From that first question, what is the most important aspect of Holton Cross Street area, some of the pre-populated answers that we offered were the quality and variety of businesses and services, support for businesses, jobs, and economic activity, a variety of activity and amenity that works well together, a safe and pleasant place to visit, walk, or ride a bike. And some of the words that were used to describe your ideal vision, we added the pre-populated answers of a local hub of innovation, an incubator for local businesses, a local employment center, walkable and bikeable jobs center, dynamic mixed-use center, amenity-rich and community-oriented, or sustainable and resilient. And then for the how close, people can choose very close, close, not close at all. And then the last question, what is missing from Holton Cross Street area? The pre-selected answers include additional small businesses and services, small services or destinations, new investment, safer walking and biking, more street trees and landscaping, more parking, more guidance for new development, improved traffic and vehicle circulation, more housing, and other. So we appreciate people taking the time. I know this one's a little more complicated and thought-provoking. We're at 77% participation now, so that's pretty close to what we had before. We're at 81% now, which is about what we had as a marker last time. So let's go ahead and end this poll. All right, now I'm sharing the results so you can see along with me. So in terms of the most important aspect of the Holton Cross Street area, right now it shows up as 67% for a safe and pleasant place to visit, walk, or ride a bike, followed by a variety of activity and amenity that works well together. What words would you use to describe your ideal vision? The top votes were a walkable and bikeable jobs center, followed by a dynamic mixed-use center and amenity-rich and community-oriented were the top three. How close is Holton Cross Street area today compared to what you'd like it to be? The leading answer was not close, could benefit from substantial changes. That was 61%. And then lastly, what is missing from the Holton Cross Street area? The top answer was safe walking and biking. So a theme is showing up in that regard. And more street trees and landscaping was second at 61%, followed by improved traffic and vehicular circulation at 56%. So this is very fruitful and productive data. As I mentioned, we'll add the results from the in-meeting votes with those that follow up via the online survey, which will be made available as well. So thank you for giving us those results.
Can you read out the message that's in the chat? It's super interesting.
Yes, let me see. Just make sure.
Sure. There are several. One is talking about that the pre-populated questions seem skewed towards promoting business. I don't think of that area that way. Instead, I think of it as a multifamily affordable area if there can be proper transportation options, including fixing the Holton intersection and providing a safe pedestrian option under the railroad. The area is just desperate for street trees as well. I think that I'll say just super quickly and then turn it back over to Josh that I think the reason maybe why some of the pre-populated questions do seem skewed towards promoting business is because that's building on the research that was done in the master plan during that time, saying that it was some type of business that there was a need to increase the non-residential tax base. So that's where that's coming from. But back to you, Josh.
Thanks, Brian. Yeah, I guess the answer there too is that we have to start somewhere and give you something to react to. So this is a part of the conversation. If the community is steering us in a different direction, we are wholly open to that. So that's what this conversation is, why it's so important and why we're having it. So I thought I saw another question about, conducting the market research. So we do, I would say we're doing sort of a general look at the, mostly given the context of the parcels today, again, commercial and light industrial marketplace, but could look, if residential is something that's desired, we could look more in that regard too. Though I will say in the region, the general understanding is that the residential market is quite strong and remains to be quite strong, and anything that could be made residential could be made residential. So in terms of the commercial and light industrial areas, we are looking at those in general terms and the characteristics of this district relative to the surrounding sub area in terms of the marketplace. One thing that we have observed as a regional agency in the greater Boston area is that these types of light industrial areas tend to shrink over time and not grow. And so that is something that has caused the light industrial areas like this to be actually quite valuable as a district and as a land use type, and that the both rents and vacancy rates for these types of light industrial and commercial spaces are quite competitive and in high demand because of that overall nature of the encroachment of other uses into these types of districts.
I want to just call everyone's attention to the comment from Susan Busher about compatibility. I think that's also important.
Great, thank you, Sally. So, all right, let's see. So just again, recapping, we touched on this slide already, but the basic characteristics of the Holton Cross Street area, you can see, and again, we're focused on those currently limited light industrial parcels of which you see their characteristics there. There's a few other characteristics we wanted to share. So the one thing I didn't mention was the total value of the land and the buildings in those purple parcels is 34.3 million. If we add in some of the surrounding context, you see more of the residential context that people were mentioning and talking about. So that is, as we looked at those old zoning maps, the area in gray is the current RA 120 multiple family residential district, which has been built out with multifamily. The surrounding Conservancy Institutional District, SCI, is the green areas around it, mostly along the river and conservation lands and some parks. Then the other thing of note that we've highlighted are the GBD, general business, smaller districts that are more neighborhood-oriented commercial types of uses. And those are in the brighter pink. Then what you could imagine is the areas that are not highlighted are effectively single-family residential for the most part. So and the land use coloring would show up as yellow. And then the last thing here we have is just a reminder to all of us that this is a study within the town of Winchester, but as a regional planning agency, we always like to look across town and municipal borders. And this is a larger industrial district shared with the city of Woburn. And you can see in the other pink tone there, as you move to the top of the screen, the extent of the light industrial district as it extends with the city of Woburn's zoning, which is dedicated to that type of use. So almost another sort of expanding the district by another half. So it's about half in one municipality and half in another. If you look at the land uses in the area, which I just hinted to, you can see the residential is the predominant use, which is the yellow tones, mostly single family, some 2 and 3 family, but mostly single family. Then the commercial uses, some of which are in the district itself, are shown in the red, the light industrial parcels in the purple pink tone. And then there are a couple mixed use, but not any, I believe, in the district parcels that we're looking at, a few in the context. And then a couple that do not have a building on them, so they're labeled as vacant. So if you look at the overall relationship and percentage of those uses, the largest is light industrial in the light industrial parcels, the zoned parcels. and this followed by commercial. And there is some residential in those district parcels already. And that doesn't, the land use is more general, but it doesn't give you as good a feel of what the actual businesses are. So this is a bit more detailed breakdown of how that might translate into actual business uses. So the predominant uses are construction, healthcare and social services, and other services. There's about 36 establishments, give or take, maybe a little bit more, that are supported by the district. And a pretty astounding, I think, 417 jobs that the district supports, which is a good amount. And it's overall a part of the Wilmington Winchester industrial submarket, which I was just alluding to in the mention about the market research. And you can see there's a vacancy rate less than 5%, which is typically around that is indication that it's a not totally strained, but a healthy market where you've got a little bit of room for people to move around, but there's not a lot of vacancy there. And you can see rents have grown over the past year, and rents are about $14 per square foot. We heard from some of the businesses in our interviews that this type of space is very valuable, actually, because it's not, you can't find it around in every municipality, and it's a benefit to the town. It allows cheaper, relatively speaking, space for local businesses to be there serving your town and its residents with the amenities and services they provide. The other thing I would mention that maybe doesn't show up as strongly in the phrasing of some of these categories is that I would say that there's a cluster in the businesses and uses of kind of family-oriented uses. So there's a swimming pool, which is oriented towards family programming. There's a dance studio, a children's theater, I think an indoor playground oriented towards families. So it's an interesting mix of those types of uses as well. In terms of the year built, most structures, almost half, are falling within the category of being built between 1940 and 1969, which puts it at an interesting period, which you're approaching the time where buildings might need to be renewed in about that age, or reinvested in some manner, or maybe subject to redevelopment as well. Not as many buildings built since the year 2000, only 2%. So it's a little bit older building stock, which might also lend itself to the affordability. Predominantly single-story structures in the district. You saw that in the photographs as well. And the building density is relatively low, between 0.1 and 0.5 FAR. FAR is a density measure called floor area ratio, and it's effectively a comparison between the area of the property and the area of the building on that property. And on the assessor's data, you can see a property where its mailing address is, and this is not a perfect shorthand, but we do look at that comparison to see if a property is owner occupied. Again, it's not a perfect translation to owner occupancy, but in this case, there's about 2/3 of the properties have a separate owner mailing address, which would indicate that the owner is not located in that property itself. And then another example, which is not a perfect science, but I think a good shorthand and indicator, is comparing the building value to the land value. So typically when you see a building which is less valuable than the land that it sits upon, that type of property is more subject to redevelopment or reinvestment than a property where the building is a lot more valuable than the land. That means that the building has been invested in or is a substantial structure. So in this case, we have almost 2/3 of the properties in the district where the land value is higher than the building value. So as I just alluded to in my verbal comments, that we typically, it's not, again, a perfect one-to-one comparison, but would typically think that those types of properties are more likely to change over time. So we've just made that clear in this diagram here. So the ones in green are, and this is based upon, again, that relationship of the land value to the building value. So if you have a property where the land sitting underneath the building is more valuable than the building itself, then that might be a property that is likely to change. Not necessarily next year or like the year after, but over time, let's say. We heard a lot about this in the feedback from the poll already. And so let's look at the transportation and sidewalk, bicycle, and connectivity and network here. You can see on the screen the area, all the black lines are where sidewalk network exists today. So pretty decent coverage of sidewalk network around the area. The Tri-Community Greenway has been mentioned in some of the interviews as well as a really tremendous asset for local businesses and patrons going to their businesses from the Tri-Community Greenway, people getting around with it. It's a great amenity. You can see a few sidewalk gaps, though, do exist on East Street, River Street, Holton Street, down the Lowell Ave turnaround, and then on some of the areas off Swanton Street. So not perfect connectivity, but getting closer over time. And then I think the other thing, maybe this is a little harder to see, but there's small little green dash marks over the streets where crosswalks exist. And to me, it looks like there's a little lighter coverage in terms of a fully marked set of street crossings and network. So you can imagine there's quite a few intersections here where there are not actually marked pedestrian crossings, which would diminish that overall connectivity of the sidewalk network to not have the safe street crossings as well. And then as we mentioned, as we we're going through those photographs, there are a decent amount of extensive curb cuts, which also diminish the walkability and pedestrian network effectiveness. So this is where there is a large area of undefined pavement where it's difficult to discern where or where not a vehicle might show up in the path of a pedestrian or a bicyclist, and it just makes it a little more difficult. In some of these areas and on some of these properties, it's fully needed and required for the function of the trucking or parking or whatever it may be, but there might be places where this could be improved. So let's pause again just for a quick check-in, give a moment to discuss and have any conversation or questions about anything that I've just raised.
Yeah, Josh, there's a few questions in the chat. The first one related to this says, how does the size of the building affect the probability of a redevelopment?
The size, I don't know that size, like in this case, it's mostly one-story structures, as I mentioned. So I don't think that the sheer volume of space that's covered by that larger single-story roof structure is sort of going to be the deciding factor in how redevelopment occurs. I think there's a lot of considerations that go into it. Of course, I think what we presented is perhaps a little bit of an oversimplification, but just as size of building itself, I don't know that I would, that would be one of the really determinant variables that I would consider in the likelihood of redevelopment.
And then there are a couple of comments related to the sidewalk infrastructure and cycling infrastructure along Cross Street. A little snippet: coming down Cross Street under the rail underpass, I'm taking my life into my hands by riding on the correct side of the street. I'm sure there are many people that can very much appreciate that. Sidewalks going under the railroad on the Cross Street are decrepit and that are unusable. They're dangerous. And isn't that sidewalk only on one side of the street? And then a second on the underneath the rail underpass. I can't see how the sidewalks can be improved in that specific area without restructuring the entire overpass. I believe you hit it on the head, Joseph Berry. That is a nasty problem. There's no other word for it. It's a nasty problem, that bridge underneath that bridge for cyclists and pedestrians. Looking at this, there's one more question. Will there currently planned cross street improvements be incorporated into the graphics? I mean, I'm not entirely, I think moving forward towards the next presentations, I believe that's what you're asking, John, and the answer is yes. We can easily incorporate those into the next presentation that we have. And then there's some more sidewalk. Calling it a sidewalk's quite generous. And here we go. Do you know if Woburn is taking or talking or studying their adjacent light industrial area at the moment? So Josh, I know we only had a short amount of time in this phase of the project, but part of the project was going to be, or the next phase was going to be talking with Woburn, and that just hasn't happened as part of this phase yet. But I don't know if you have any more to say about that, Josh.
Yeah, I don't know if they're studying it currently, but we did reach out to the planner in the city of Woburn and have, and they're interested in sort of discussing the area and collaborating about it. But I mean, it would be great if they have either underway or the intention to also study, and then maybe we could join forces a little more officially. And Diab, it looks like you have your hand up as well.
We cannot hear you, Diab. Still having an issue at the moment. You're muting on and off, but it looks like it's something wrong with your card. Sound card or something. Why, in the meantime, there is one more question in the chat. Can the town add a sidewalk along Holton Street to the town line without a study? There is a sidewalk priority list, and we can find out where Holton Street lies on that. There's every year there's new sidewalks and that get built, and I can look into that to find out where Holton Street is with that. Rich's chat message about pictures. See Rich's email about pictures. Who do I send them to? This is from Diab. And it would be to Josh. So yes, anyone who would be sending pictures that you would like to be put into the study, or you would want the team, meaning the planning board, MAPC and myself, you would send them to Josh. That is correct. So now I this is good. People are being more active, but we're just going to keep going. But Josh, I didn't know where we were in terms of timing, and whether or not these questions actually deal with the analysis, or whether there's going to be more of a free flow soon of questioning.
Yeah, I think they're all productive. We would love to hear what people need to say. So let's go ahead and wrap them up, and then we'll move on to the next section.
Great. I'll keep moving. So there's a question from Chris. Says, Josh, what are the typical options moving forward after a study like this? A number of small projects, a master plan, pay as we go. Broadly speaking, what are we trying to get to here? I believe you mean in this specific, like you said, after this study. So what is the next step?
Yeah, I think the intended products out of this work are focused on zoning would be one of the products potentially. If there are recommended changes that how the zoning could be optimized relative to the community's vision for this area. And then the other, it sounds like, would be identifying specific infrastructure, specifically street or sidewalk type of investments that would likely in this study, you would be setting yourself up for a more detailed design and engineering effort potentially. That would not be a part of our work, but that we could set the stage for.
So just to expand on that a little bit, we do have a townwide transportation master plan that's happening right now. That is going to, with tool design, that's going to be kind of taking all the different projects, infrastructure projects related to traffic calming and needed infrastructure and pedestrian and cycling infrastructure all over town. And what it's going to do, what this plan is going to do, is allow us to allow the town to prioritize those projects into a meaningful fashion, similar to how we did with our stormwater projects throughout the past 15 years. So, you know, having a list of 12 projects or however long it is. So Holton and Cross, in my opinion, and I'm just going to go out here, even though no one's asking for it, I mean, that is that spine of a concern. The Holton and Cross intersection for this area, in my opinion, and I think a lot of people that have ever tried to make a turn out of Holton or on the other side, is it Lowell? It's very challenging. There's no doubt that project was going to be on the list, and hopefully a lot of people on the call have actually been able to interact with the transportation plan online map. It's closed for the moment, but I'll stop talking and back to you, Josh. I don't think, oh, sorry, not back to you. There are a few more questions here. So what is Winchester's business permit process? It seems sorely inadequate. It has not protected the Holton Street area from business use, business type, business expansion. Allowing oil trucks to be parked at the end of Baldwin. So this seems to be issues with the building permit process. I don't know if Josh really is looking at that. Or I'm sure that he's not at the moment. I'm not entirely sure how to answer that question. I don't believe it's related at the moment to the zoning or potential vision. This has to do, it looks like more of enforcement, in my opinion. That's what I see related to that question. And I think that is the last one at the moment.
Yeah, I would say though, if there is an issue with enforcement and things like that, we would like to be aware of it and note kind of specifically what it is about and see if we can identify ways that might be improved. So, but yes, so another just example, I think with that case is this planning study is the type that we can hopefully get to the bottom of some of the concerns and opportunities and make recommendations, but then ultimately, even with the zoning, there will be additional action which will be required to, for example, get the zoning prepared for town meeting and get it passed and approved by town meeting members. Similarly, if we identify an issue with the business permitting process, then we would try to outline what the issue is and get that information passed along to the people who could potentially deal with a solution. So that's what this process would be looking at. So next we wanted to move into defining a vision, and we have again a series of questions related to this district that hopefully you all can help to give us some guidance in terms of where this all should head. That was really our focus for this evening. So again, we're looking at that area with the yellow rectangle, which is the limited light industrial IL in the surrounding multiple family residential district, RA 120. And so we have, this is the most words I could fit on a slide this evening. And so we've got them all, but this is an excerpt from the zoning today, which lists all of the permitted as of right uses, the special permit uses, and the not permitted or prohibited uses. And just to give you a feel for what's in there, and these are for the IL parcels, which we've been focused on. So I highlighted a few, just thinking that they might be of interest, but for example, permitted as of right, you see personal service establishment, a general service establishment, a trade shop, a storage, distribution, or wholesale marketing of materials, manufacturing establishment, a laboratory, outdoor parking for commercial vehicles. So it sounds like perhaps there might be a connection to that last comment in the chat, actually, to this type of use, where outdoor parking for commercial vehicles is an allowed use. Removal of clay, sand, gravel, stone, or other earth products. And you can see things that aren't not permitted are quite a few things, including most of the types, all of the residential types, and then indoor commercial amusement or assembly uses, which some of the categories of uses might be similar to that today. So it'd be interesting to see exactly sort of what the allowed permitted uses, what they were crafted within. So that's a feel for what's going on there. And I know that's a lot of different uses and information, but I wanted to give you all a chance to see if you had specific thoughts about uses. So I have a 3-question survey, which I'm launching for you now. And the first question, and this is another one where you can select all the answers that you think apply. The first question is, what uses would you like to see more of in the Holton Cross Street area? And that includes construction and manufacturing, wholesale retail trade, professional scientific technology, administrative, educational, finance, and insurance, healthcare, social services, food and other services, transportation and warehousing, arts, entertainment, recreation. So we're trying to be similar in structure to some of the language you just saw from the zoning. Residential or other, and you can add your other thoughts in the chat. That would be helpful. The second question is the same pre-populated answers, except what uses would you like to see less of? So if you want to see more of some of them, you could select them in the first question. If you'd like to see less of some of them, you can select that in the second question. And then related to those uses, the third question asks, what impacts are you most concerned about in the Holton Cross Street area? And those pre-populated answers are demand for town infrastructure / services, impact on taxes, impact on traffic, noise or other local nuisance, impact on parking, concern about the environment or contamination, and then other, and you can add those thoughts into the chat as well. So we're getting a feel for where the uses are relative to both what's there today. You saw a little bit of what the zoning indicates in that last slide. I'd like to see your reflections and help us define where this work should be headed. And if you do, as you're doing this, if you do think that your neighbor or friend or fellow business owner would like to also participate in answering these questions, we'll make sure that we make the survey link available and you can have that and refer people to it. Okay, we're at 76% participated now, which is pretty close to our previous benchmarks. All right, 80% now, so that's pretty good. So let's look at the results together now. So from the first question, what uses would you like to see more of? 72% landed on arts, entertainment, recreation, which would fit with that sort of, I would say, cluster of family-related uses that I was describing earlier. Second up is professional, scientific, technology. So those types of more commercial or office related uses, maybe a little bit of innovative uses there. And then the next highest is residential, which is not a part of the district today, but could be made so. And then the next is administrative, education, finance, and insurance, which again is a little more on the commercial side of things. Next is what uses would you like to see less of? So the leading is a tie between construction and manufacturing and transportation and warehousing, followed by followed by residential and wholesale and retail trade. So it sounds like we have a little bit of a split audience on the appropriateness of residential. And then lastly, what impacts are you most concerned about? Impact on traffic and noise or other local nuisance were the leading vote getters at 78%, followed closely by concern about the environment or contamination. And then the others were quite a bit less than those three, which were in the 70 percentiles. All right, so thank you for that feedback. We've got a few more like that to get to next, so we'll just keep moving along. So the next part of the zoning code we wanted to give a window into was the table of dimensional regulations. So this is really defines the size, scale, and scope of the types of uses. So the intensity of the uses that we just talked about, this is how much of them you could fit on any given parcel. And you can see things such as the minimum lot area of 20,000 square feet, the minimum lot frontage of 100 feet, minimum lot width of 100 feet, and then the minimum setbacks in regards to front, side, and rear yards. So that's 25 feet for a front yard, 20 feet for a side and rear yard. The minimum open space percentage of 60%, and the building height in stories of either 3 stories. So 3 stories is quite a bit taller than the existing structures in the district today, which were predominantly 1 story, and maximum height in feet of 45 feet. So that's another, I would say that's another contributing variable in that conversation we were having earlier about the likelihood of a property to change through redevelopment or reinvestment, is the difference between what is allowed by zoning today in terms of the scale and what is currently on the properties. And so you see there is a decent gap between what is allowed and what is on the properties today. And these are just notes that clarify through footnotes some of the things on that table, but I won't belabor that. So the next is your thoughts on another poll about the buildings and sites in the Holton Cross Street area. So let me launch that and I'll talk you through it. So the first is in regard to setbacks. So the question is, are buildings set back from the street an appropriate distance in the Holton Cross Street area? And we just saw those requirements. So the front setback was 25 feet. So the answers are yes, the current setback of 25 feet is correct or about right. No, the current setback of 25 feet should be reduced, meaning buildings should be closer to the street. Or no, the current setback of 25 feet should be increased, meaning buildings would be further away from the street. It depends on the property, building, and use, or maybe you have no opinion or comment about these more technical aspects of it. And then the next question is about building height. And all these are relative to the current zoning. So the current zoning was 3 stories, 45 feet. The first response is yes, the current maximum height of 3 stories, 45 feet is correct or about right. No, the current maximum height should be reduced, buildings would be shorter. Or no, the current maximum height should be increased, buildings should be taller. It depends on the property, building, or use. You have no opinion or other comment. And then the density that is allowed, is the density appropriate? So yes, the current minimum lot area of 20,000 square feet, minimum percent open space of 60% is correct. Or no, the current lot area and open space requirements should be increased, which would reduce density, or those requirements should be decreased, which would increase density. And then, or it depends on the buildings and the use. We have no opinion on that one. And then lastly is a question about the types of design guidelines you think could be helpful to address some of the issues in the Holton Cross Street area. There are not too many design guidelines for this area today. So there could be design guidelines that focus more on the position of the building, the overall scale of the building, the appearance of building facades, streetscape and landscape features, design of the property frontage and curb cuts, improvements to the street, sidewalk, and bicycle network. Those would be sort of private contributions to those improvements. Parking design and features, outdoor open space, design, amenities and features, building and site signage, or anything else you think could be covered by a design guideline that you could add in the chat. So there's a lot going on with this one. I think this might be our longest 4-question poll of the evening. So I'll let this keep going for a moment. We're at 50% participation so far. Thank you, Anne, for putting your comments in the chat, since the poll submit didn't work for you that time. So as you can see, we're trying to get a feel for, sharing what the current zoning is, getting a reaction of how that may or may not fit with what you'd like to see. And then we'll be using this feedback and information to think about what your answers are telling us and how the zoning could better reflect the community's opinions.
Josh, quick question. It says, will you be posting the deck on the town page so that we can download? I can certainly do that. There will be a Holton Street section on the planning board page where we will be posting all of our documents.
Correct. Yes, the intention is to post the slide presentation, this recording, and the link to the survey so that people could follow up and give additional answers. All right, so we're at 77% now, which is very close to our 80%. So we'll close this. So the results looks like the first answer, setbacks, it depends on the property, building, and use. So that points a little bit toward maybe some special permit or site plan review type of setup where it might be more determined based upon what's being proposed and the circumstances of the property, which is a fair answer. And then it looks like that's also the case for building height, which would depend on the property, the building, and the use, is the leading vote getter. And the others, there's no clear pattern in terms of the other yes or no's beyond that leading vote getter. And then looking at question number 3, the appropriate density, it looks like there's not, those are all pretty close. The leading vote getters are a tie, but they're actually a tie in the opposite direction. So a tie for reducing density and a tie for increasing density. So I would say that so far, the answer to that question is the least determinant of any that we've seen so far this evening. The answers that we add to these results from the additional online survey results may help clarify that a little bit. And then lastly, in the design guidelines, the improvements to the street, sidewalk, and bicycle network, what could be required around that in that regard was the leading vote getter at 88%. Followed by design of property frontage and curb cuts and streetscape and landscape features. I think those are all worthwhile features to approach with a little more guidance from the photographs that we saw from visiting the area. All right, let me stop sharing that. So we have one last set of survey questions that I'll give us the introduction to now. So this is the table of off-street parking requirements. And we haven't seen much actually in terms of concerns or issues with the parking mentioned in the previous comments or results so far. But these are actually pretty, I think, standard compared to other districts in the town. I don't think there's much out of the ordinary going on here. The last question, which we've seen a lot about, not as much about parking, but we've seen a lot about circulation. So this last area of questioning is in that regard. Hopefully we'll get a little more specific. But the questions are, have you experienced traffic or driving challenges in the Holton Cross Street area? And then the second question is, have you experienced parking challenges in the Holton Cross Street area? And the third question is, have you experienced challenges for safer walking and biking in the Holton Cross Street area? And then we have some pre-populated answers again for each one. For each of these, you can select all the answers that apply. For the first question about driving challenges or traffic, the first possible answer is general traffic congestion. And if you'd like to add a street or a location, an intersection or something like that in the chat, that would be helpful additional information. Truck traffic or congestion, a difficult intersection, conflict with other vehicles, conflict with bicyclists or pedestrians, other vehicles speeding or driving too fast, or any other challenges that we weren't able to list there. We have heard a few already about the difficulty of, I guess, the primary intersection within this study area, which is that 5-way or so Holton Cross Street plus other segments coming into that one large compound intersection. And the second question, have you experienced parking challenges? First answer, potentially, is not enough private parking at a property, or not enough street parking or public parking near the property. Vehicles double parked or blocking other vehicles. Vehicles parked on driveways, crosswalks, or sidewalks. Not enough reserved or accessible parking available. Not enough short-term parking available, or other parking challenges. And you can add those in the chat as well. And then lastly are the challenges for safer walking and biking. Missing sidewalk gaps, or missing sidewalks or gaps in the sidewalk network, a missing marked crosswalk, vehicles not stopped for a marked crosswalk, not stopping for a marked crosswalk, vehicles traveling too fast, missing bike lanes, missing bike crossings, vehicles parked on crosswalks or sidewalks. It feels unsafe to walk in the area due to volume or speed of traffic. Feels unsafe to walk in the area due to lighting and general environment, or other walking, biking challenges. You can write those in too.
I can just share a few things in the chat in terms of intersections. So we have Holton and Cross as an intersection, need a light at Holton and Cross. Cross and Main. Cross and Main is a nightmare. I agree with you, Joseph. However, it actually is in Woburn, unfortunately. I believe there have been a number of attempts to do something about that, but that is in fact not in Winchester. Speeding is an issue every day on Holton Street. I've been hit almost multiple times coming out of my driveway due to speeding on Cross. Speeding on Holton is an ongoing problem. Not just a light, we need complete reconfiguration of Holton Lowell East Cross. I think I'm missing one. It's 5 ways. What a mess of an intersection. There must be a better configuration. I could not agree more. Parking when the Acera school has some kind of event, there's not enough parking near the school, so the car spills over into the neighborhoods. East Street and Williams Circle. Loring and Cross, another intersection, speeding on Cross. And will be much worse as River Street comes in, which is 142 units. We need to do more Woburn from Main and Cross. Main and Cross is dangerous. Keep a lot of Holton and Cross and Loring and Cross, speeding on Holton and Cross, a very common theme here in the chat. There's not enough parking for the vet there, and then when the Acera or the Russian school or the play has an event, then there's not enough parking. And I also worry about the soccer field could be problematic too. A lot of good feedback there. Thank you for all of that.
Yeah, that's great. Really appreciate I'll share these results, and maybe, Brian, you can keep, if it looks like maybe a couple more popped up.
Sure. Yep. The last one here is the pedestrian bike passage between Cross and Swanton. So definitely a theme that's no surprise to anyone that the cycling, pedestrian, and the vehicular infrastructure is in much need of either reconfigurations or total redesigns or upgrades. Mainly because people are able to either speed or there's not sufficient width for the adequate sidewalks and cycling infrastructure, and there's at least 3 extremely key dangerous intersections in this corridor.
Yep, that shows up in the survey results, the poll results. So we see difficult intersection, which Brian's just given us the specifics from the chat. So thank you for really rolling up your sleeves and giving us that information. Well, that's the leading answer for the first question: experiencing traffic or driving challenges. Difficult intersection with 94%, followed by other vehicles speeding or driving too fast. And we saw that in the chat responses as well. And then that's closely followed, I guess not too closely, followed by conflict with other vehicles. And then, have you experienced parking challenges in the Holton Cross Street area? The leading vote getter is vehicles parked on driveways, crosswalks, or sidewalks. I heard that also in, I think, some of the interviews with the business owners as well. And that's followed by not enough street parking or public parking near property and other parking challenges, which showed up in some of the chat responses we just went through. And then lastly, experiencing challenges for safer walking and biking in the corridor. The number 1 response was the missing sidewalks/gaps in the network, which we highlighted in that diagram initially, but those are noticeable and an issue. Vehicles driving too fast, the second most frequent response, and then feeling unsafe to walk in the area due to that volume and speed of traffic, which makes the sidewalks even more important. Great, so thank you all for that. It really helps to sharpen our approach and focus for this work. All right, so this is just the final catch-all of us. We have some time here to just open the floor and have more of a discussion. And then to wrap up, we'll basically just give some next steps for where this is headed. But I guess I'll even just go ahead and stop sharing for now. And we'll start that up again just so we can have a conversation if we can. All right. So yes, questions. Looks like Sally, you have your hand up.
I do. And one of the things I noticed in 2 or 3 different contexts through this whole presentation is this, when you have one zoning district up against another zoning district. And I know it happens all over town, and in this section of town, it happens between residential and IL. And to me, that's an opportunity for really sensitive and thoughtful treatment of buffering, so that residential neighborhoods continue to feel residential, and that light industrial areas are buffered adequately, so that, you know, lights from buildings, lights from cars, whatever. I don't think of it as a noisy area except for the trucks. So that's one thing that I think really stuck out to me, was this intersection of zoning districts. And then the other thing is just this huge need for major infrastructure investment in that area to encourage other kinds of investments that the town would decide are strategically needed there. So, you know, those two things really jumped out at me about the need for infrastructure and the need for really good buffering codes. That's what I had.
Great, thank you, Sally. Yeah, I think that would be an area for fruitful exploration in terms of guidelines and some additional requirements, how to make good neighbors effectively.
I'm just gonna go to the chat here. Said we really should also try to add other transportation options, not solely pedestrian or car. Why doesn't a shuttle run, for example? I'd like to see a shuttle for the people who live north and west to get to town center, or some kind of space-age monorail or something. So there was a unsuccessful attempt to get the developer for the River Street 40B to pay for a study to do for a shuttle study. So again, that was an unsuccessful attempt. But there are, as part of the transportation master plan, there is definitely going to be discussions around a shuttle in town. It says there used to be a minibus in town. I think many people remember that. I was not here at the time. We have town bylaws need to protect residential abutters or neighborhoods against pollutants that are encroaching upon residential properties, noises, fumes, dust. The Baldwin Street suffers from all of the above. Per the zoning enforcement officer, visual screen bylaw does not apply to the neighborhood when the use or tenants or owners change. Apparently the properties were grandfathered in perpetuity. I think property owners would be responsive if requested by the town. We are at the mercy of commercial business courtesy. Not that I'm ignoring that, but I think I don't know how to really respond in terms of question, but we are, as we talked about previously, it seems like this is an enforcement issue that we can bring into the report, and we can help determine what's the best way to go about that through a potential zoning change or otherwise. I'm just going to keep going here. There's a few more. Access to the bike path is from East Williams. Baldwin depends upon a single sidewalk under the railroad. So that was Richard Rohan answering a question from Joseph. WRT zoning bylaws or other bylaws, could there be a way to limit the hours of operation for businesses, especially noisy ones? Yes, there is a possibility to do that, but I think the residents of Baldwin Street, I think it's not just the truck traffic, but also train traffic as well, which they can speak about what the current issues are in terms of if there are any with the train. But there's been a historically long and drawn out issues with the train. But that is Sally, that was one of the major noise issues, was actually the train, not just the banging and all the other commercial and industrial uses that are done there. But the train was a big one. I Ching.
Yeah, I had a question for Josh. In the dimensional requirements, you had mentioned that it's a lot of these parcels hadn't developed to sort of the dimensional limits. And I was wondering if you knew why, did the zoning requirements change after the buildings were built? And have they not been like old enough for developers to see that a need for reinvestment?
I guess in terms of the evolution of the zoning, I don't know for sure what the characteristics of the zone were to correlate with that zoning map that I showed back in the 70s and 80s. My guess is that it probably has always been 3 stories, 45 feet, because it's not typical that you would see a height increase like that. I think the reason being for the difference is just that there is not a much functional use for upper stories with many of these industrial type buildings when they're built for, usually they're built for a specific purpose or owner or tenant, and there isn't often, they're usually related to the ground floor relationship with shipping bays or other aspects of the site that they're dealing with. And sometimes you'll see a small portion of that structure as a second story for maybe some additional office space, which would support the main business, which is related to that large floor area of the larger building. But it's not unusual that you see these types of districts, even though the zoning may allow a taller height for a light industrial or larger commercial box that you see on most of these properties today. The upper stories just aren't of any functional use for many of the businesses.
So I'm not seeing anything else in the chat at the moment that we haven't gone over.
All right, looks like Sally, you have another?
So this is a question directed to Brian for some more interpretation of the results of the 2030 master plan process. When this area was identified as an opportunity area, it was 3 words: expanding, opportunity area. I still don't have a really clear sense of what the vision is for this area, and maybe through the filter of not just livability, but there's all this demand for more commercial in Winchester, to take the burden off of the residential tax base. And is that a lot of what's driving this conversation right now? I just need a little bit of clarity on the backstory.
Sure. There in the, I want to say it was the mid to late 1990s, there was a plan called the Triangle Master Plan that incorporated part of the light industrial district as well as the RG and the RA 120. And because it formed a triangle. So that work basically looked at potentially expanding new commercial uses in the area, specifically medical, robotics, computer engineering, these types of high-tech type of basically kind of trying to make a small tech area. So that's nothing that we've done. I mean, that was the planning board in the late 90s, and that kind of sat on a shelf. And then through the master plan, we kind of dusted that off and said, well, we don't know exactly what we want here, if we want robotics or housing or we don't know what, but why, so the idea was that it was commercial. The only thing that we were working off of from then at the time was this triangle master plan. And I can also put that up on the website as well, so people have some context there. But I think that is kind of where it's coming from, as a little bit of the idea of changing. Right now about 95.5% of our taxes come from the residential tax base, and about 4.5% comes from commercial. To change that 1%, meaning to go from 95.5% residential to 94.5% residential, 1 more percent commercial, we would have to build, in terms of square footage, several Home Depots, something like that. So this is not going to move the needle crazily amount, a very large amount, but it certainly will help. Sorry for the long-winded response. Diab, your hand is up, but can we hear you? Nope. It's a good try, though. We can see your mouth moving, but unfortunately, not there tonight. I do see another.
How about now?
Yes.
Oh,
Go right ahead, Diab.
okay, thanks. I wanted to point out that the town has done a study of Cross Street. It was done by Tool as a transportation study, and it looked at some improvements. And I think that someone may already have mentioned that, and maybe John Shabir mentioned that in the chat. So I think that will be forthcoming. We will be looking at that as part of this. And the other reason, I think, in response to Sally's question, is that I think when we started looking at areas of town which seem to be perhaps more underutilized and underdeveloped, and Holton Street seems to be one of those, as well as our current look at North Main Street, and then possibly looking at Cambridge Street, the other commercial areas. So I think it was just going around town and trying to look at areas that hadn't really been studied and try to see what we could do to improve it. So.
I think we have one more recent in the chat. This is a good point, Anne. This is from Susan Busher. The commercial truck noise can be severe, starting warm up early in the morning, pulling in, running late into the night. Trucking businesses are not compatible to abutting residential neighborhoods. If the property stays commercial, it should be office or service type businesses with normal business hours. Neither commercial nor residential want to complain or be complained about. Totally agree with that one. Josh, I think it's back to you.
All right. So let's, I'll share my screen again. We'll just talk about some very brief next steps, which I think I've basically covered verbally, but we'll do so on a slide. So the big next step is that we will be putting the meeting recording, the meeting presentation that we've given with all the analysis and information, and the online poll, which will be the exact replica of the questions that were asked in this meeting, except as an online poll so that people can respond at their leisure over the next few weeks. And then we'll be analyzing the results from this meeting and any results we receive thereafter through the online poll, combining them. We'll get those compiled and put back out to the community so you all can see how things landed. And then we'll be basically using that analysis to advance our thinking, compare what was said in these responses to the current zoning, to what may or may not be in the current zoning, to what may or may not want to be included, for example, as design guidelines, if we think about a set of design guidelines that might be appropriate to address some of the concerns or opportunities that have been raised through all the comments. And then also thinking about how do we begin to move in maybe coordination with some of the larger transportation and infrastructure planning that's occurring in getting some of these intersections and sidewalk gaps moved, make sure that they're moved along with those other priorities. And then the other thing I'll mention right before we go to another comment, and we'll open the floor up again just to see if anyone's got any more. I saw Sally had a hand. The other, just to plug again, if you would like to be involved in a stakeholder interview, we invite you to do so. We've performed a few, but not as many as we would like. So I'd be very interested if anyone has suggestions, contact information for yourself or someone that you think we should speak with. We'd be very happy to receive that information and reach out to those people. And my email again is on the screen, and that's jfiala@mapc.org. So with that, let's open it one last time to some comments, but that's our presentation for this evening. And Sally, did you have a final comment?
So my comment has to do with the use regulations, the slide that you apologized because the type was so small and there was so much text on the slide. But I think that there is an opportunity here for people who live right in that area to weigh in on uses in IL. There was something that stuck out to me when we were looking at that slide, and I don't think we should go back to it right now because it's hard to read. But I don't know, Brian, is there an opportunity for the planning board to get input from residents of each district on their opinions on uses permitted and not permitted and special permit required?
So yeah, I mean, I think that part of the poll, I think did cover that. I think that more of that can be through stakeholder interviews, and we've also been people have been commenting through the chat. But I think the idea is to, in order to get that feedback, the way that we're going to be first trying to do that is to be certainly everyone on the call here, and let everyone know to email Josh in order to potentially have a stakeholder interview. But these types of uses that we would be talking about, those will definitely be discussed at a further meeting as well, to hone in on what the proper uses would be.
And just to follow up, if anybody who is on the call wants to read the zoning bylaws, they're on the planning board website, which Brian put in the chat. It's fascinating reading, I promise you. It's like,
Thank you, Sally. Do you have another? Is that a new hand or an old hand?
That is a new hand, and I just I want to point out, is that there are legal limitations to whether or not you can change a use and not have it grandfathered. So we have to be careful. I know a lot of people look at the existing uses and they say, we don't want the next person to be able to do that. Or if we change the use, that should stop it. But there are rights that go with the property and the use. And as much as we would like to say, you can't do this, there's a limit to what can be done through zoning. So if you don't see something change the way you want it, it's not because we don't want to do it. It's just that sometimes we have no control in those sectors. So I just want to be clear that I know there's a lot of frustration about what goes on, and certainly there are frustrations about enforcement, and sometimes our hands are tied, but we'll try to be as transparent as possible when that comes up, so that you understand why things are the way they are.
Yeah, with grandfathering, are there limitations on what can be done to alter an existing property before, that right sort of goes away? Meaning, like, can you demolish something and then rebuild it in a similar, in a similar use, but a very different format?
I will say that is a brilliant question for town council, because I am not a lawyer.
It does depend on a number of things. If it was through a special permit to begin with, whether it was a by right use at the time, and yeah, a whole bunch of court cases. But
I retract the question.
Any other final comments or questions or thoughts? All right, well, we appreciate you all spending your time this evening with us. Nice summer evening, no less. So we really appreciate the effort. And please do refer this effort to your neighbors and friends, and share the link in the once that gets published with Brian at the town website. Appreciate everyone's time very much. Thank you so much.
thank you so much, Josh. So the planning board is having a regular meeting right after this under a different Zoom. I'm going to put that in the chat for those that are going to be joining us anyway. But I really wanted to thank everybody for coming, and really thank Josh for that very detailed analysis and presentation. Dia, back to you.
Oh, I didn't have anything to say. I was clapping.
Great.
Thank you all.
Oh, we're asking for one more. Can you put Josh's email up again? So you could put that on the screen, Josh, but I can also put it jfiala@mapc.
I just put it in the chat.
Great, there we go. And when in doubt, if you can't remember anything, you can always email planningboard@winchester.us, which goes to all the planning board members and myself. Again, thanks to everybody for a really robust discussion, and I'm glad we went over, to be honest. That's always good. It's a good sign. Well, hope to see you guys at a regular meeting next, and we'll be in touch either through email or some other form of communication to get you to our next meeting. So please tell your friends and your neighbors what you've how you can email Josh and potentially have an interview. So please look at the Winchester.us Planning Board website, and we will see you next time. Have a good night, everyone.
Thanks.
Recording
This evening, we have a slight change of schedule, in that we had set aside some time this evening in case we were going to talk about town council. The select board voted last night. This is, I guess, part of an update to replace our current council of Anderson and Krieger with another multi-named firm that I will eventually learn how to say, but right now I don't recall who they were.
It's something Tallerman.
Yes. So, so there will be a transition period. We have already put one, we had a project that we were thinking about earlier this year, which would deal with cleaning up some of the definitions and dimensions. And we put that on hold because the select board had decided to rebid the contract and we didn't know what would happen because this was a multi-month project. And now we've discovered that they have changed. It'll probably be several more months before everything shakes out and we know exactly who we'll be dealing with in terms of our contact for the land use and the transition period. So I don't know what at the moment, what our plans are for moving forward for things that involve town council. Hopefully we will have some idea prior to when we need to deal with warrant articles for town meeting. And
I Ching have a
Yeah,
question?
I thought that the planning board was the first board to hire Anderson Krieger to help with the zoning rewrite. And where did that money come from? And is that possible again?
So that was professional services money. We hired outside counsel, Anderson Krieger, in order to do the zoning and the design guidelines. Not solely, we also worked with an architect as well. It wasn't just Anderson and Krieger, but they worked on the section 7.3 and the regulations governing section 7.3.
So like to contract them is a possibility if we have the professional services.
I don't think it's I don't know. I don't know. We can use professional services for legal services. It's unclear if it would make, there hasn't been kind of a protocol in terms of how we would be going about that. I mean, this just happened last night, so.
I think one of the big differences is that prior to hiring Anderson and Krieger, we had no land use attorneys available to us through the town. Our town council was not a land use town council. And so we hired, Mark Bobrowski was originally hired by the planning board for land use. And then Art Krieger. And then when Art Anderson and Krieger was hired, we had access to land use through town council. And the new firm also provides land use. So if we can make use of that without having to go through our professional services, then that would be, or whatever we call them, that would be preferable. But you're right, if we need to move more quickly, then we'll keep that, we should keep it in mind. So
by the way, the name of the firm is Mead, Tellerman and Costa.
Mead, Tellerman and Costa.
Is there an E? I guess I can look it up, an E at the end of Mead.
No, it's MEAD,
Right,
and
okay.
then Tallerman, TALERMAN, Tallerman and Costa, I believe.
Mhm.
So I guess that was sort of an update. We are running about 20 minutes late due to the I think highly successful Holton Street MAPC meeting. Oh wait, shoot, we have to open our meeting. Welcome everyone to the Winchester Planning Board meeting on what is today's date? Today is the 28th of June, 2022. You are being recorded both via WinCam. I think we're being recorded via WinCam. Yes, hi WinCam, and via Zoom. And we do have a quorum. So why don't I have everyone call themselves present? Kurt Spring?
Present.
Sally Dale?
Present.
Nick Rosettos?
Here.
Ching Scott?
Present.
And Diabjarius is also present. We also have with us Brian Zucchelli, town planner, Nancy Polcari, our recording secretary, and some welcome members of our public. So the first thing we're going to do, so we have minutes, we have a discussion, or I'm sorry, yeah, we have some minutes to go over. We have a discussion of planner description, and then we wanted to start discussing the matter that came up at our last planning board in terms of what the requirements were for getting a waiver from the minimum square foot, the 500 square foot. It's not a permit. It's a permit. It's a waiver from a special permit, I believe.
Site plan
Site
review.
plan review.
Site plan
Site
review,
plan
thank
review.
you. Sorry, my apologies. So may I suggest that we do meeting minutes first?
Yes.
Then we dive into the planning, the planner description, the position description, because I think those are things that we've been sitting on for a while. So Brian, if you would pop up the minutes. And so this is for Tuesday, May 24th, 2022. Are there any comments on this one?
I have no edits to these minutes.
I had an edit, I think it was on this one where 910 Main Street, I believe, is in GBD 3, not GBD 2. So on the fourth line in number 3, it describes it as being in GBD 2. And Brian, am I correct that that's GBD 3?
You know, I think it's right.
Is it right on the?
I don't know if it's right there. I can look that up right now though while we're talking or while we keep moving forward. I can look at that.
Yeah, and that was my only comment. Any other comments from the board? If not, is there a motion to approve the minutes of, while Brian's looking that up, I will jog my memory.
May 24th,
Thank you.
2002.
I have the zoning map right in front of me. Is it right next to Canal, right above Canal?
It is north of Canal Street.
GBD 3.
It's GBD 3. Okay, thank you. So that, if we could, have that fixed, and because I brought it up, I get to send that fix to Nancy. That's my job. Okay, so other than that, can I get a motion to approve the minutes of Tuesday, June 28th, 2022?
So moved.
So moved.
Second.
Okay, we have multiple firsts and seconds. Roll call vote, please. Sally Dale,
Aye.
Nick Rosettos,
Aye.
Kurt Spring,
Aye.
Ching Scott,
Aye.
DF Jerry says aye as well. Thank you. Next one, Tuesday, May 31st, 2022. Any amendments, or is there a motion for approval of minutes?
I have no edits to May 31st.
I don't either.
Motion to approve.
Thank you. Is it so? Second.
Second.
Okay. Roll call vote, please. Ching Scott,
Aye.
Kurt Spring,
Aye.
Nick Rosettos,
Aye.
Sally Dale,
Aye.
and myself, I say aye as well. Okay, minutes for Tuesday, June 14th, 2022. Any amendments, or is there a motion to approve?
I have corrections and edits.
Okay, please.
So on page 1, under updates, Chair Jarius, on the second line, insert the word commission after disability access.
Yes.
And then on page 3, under discussion, it gets to Mr. Dale, second line. He's actually a landscape architect, not a landscape designer. And that's relevant because I live here. And then on page 4, where it says under ZBA petition 3965, this is item 4, where Mr. Patchell, the petitioner, spoke, that noted there's no process for him to get a waiver except this. The planning board discussion extended beyond that, but it is what we have on the agenda for later. So I don't know if the minutes need to reflect that.
The minutes need to reflect which of those two things that there was
Where it
further
says Mr.
discussion.
Patchell noted there is no process for him to get a waiver except this. And then we went on and we talked all about that.
Yeah, I guess that would fit there.
I mean, what you,
We certainly did talk about it.
was
Yeah.
it? Yeah, we did. I just don't know how to get that into the minutes.
Yeah, that's my question as well.
I mean,
Let me
we could say discussion. Yeah, that's how Nancy does it. She says discussion.
Yeah, and planning board. What is it? We empathize with the.
I mean, we could just say that a discussion ensued and a further conversation was put on an agenda later for a more detailed discussion.
of the waiver
Oh, well, of
process.
the process for getting a waiver, it's actually, there's a waiver clause in the
Yeah.
bylaw, and then it doesn't say waiver process, so Brian's right.
Okay, so Sally, could you take up that as to create a sentence?
Yes,
based on
I
what Brian
will,
just said?
I will do that.
Okay, thank you
Okay.
very much.
And then I think I had one other thing, which is the ZBA petition. This is item number 5. So number 4 was seeking a waiver. Number 5 was not. This is petition 3966.
You are very correct. We're just undergoing site plan review.
Right, so petitioner is seeking
Site plan review.
site plan review. And so then when it says Ms. Scott moved to recommend favorable action, this is on page 5 now. I believe she was recommending to recommend favorable action to endorse.
That is the correct language, and I'm
That,
certain,
yep, that is correct. It would be the petitioners are seeking site plan review. And then that is correct. It would be endorsing the site, but recommend endorsing the site plan.
And then the only other edit I had was on page 5, number 7. It says that I suggested an immediate idea for education and outreach is to expand the PB agenda list to include more detail and to post on the town Facebook page. I don't think I suggested the town Facebook page, but I did suggest that we put more detail into our agenda. So that second reference is not what I said. Someone else said that.
okay.
You can fess up, whoever it was.
If you just want to strike that, I guess that's fine by me. Any other opinions by the board?
That could have been me. I definitely brought up the question of
I think that was
education
Kurt.
and outreach.
Okay.
I don't know that I was just advocating that is a means to educate or at least make aware the community of various events.
Okay, so we should probably, Nancy, if you could make a note that Kurt said something along those lines and maybe get that, put that in there. Sally, if you would note that in your notes to Nancy,
Right.
and I will. Okay.
Good, done.
Is there a motion to approve the minutes of Tuesday, June 14th as amended?
So moved.
Is there a second? Okay, thank you. Roll call vote. Sally Dale,
Aye.
Nick Rosettos,
Aye.
Kurt Spring,
Aye.
I Ching Scott,
Aye.
and Dave Jerry says aye as well. Thank you all very much. I think that's the last one, correct? Yay. Okay, so let's move on to the position description then. So in your packet, you've got 2 position descriptions. You had the original job description, and then you had a much slimmer and to the point one. And thanks to my English teacher for teaching me how to speak English. Thanks to I Ching for providing us with the framework for this. She came through and gave us a very streamlined and very concise position description. So the key question we have with us tonight is if there are any comments or changes you'd like to make in that new job description. Our next step after incorporating those comments would be to send it to Human Resources and to make sure that it meets all of their criteria, whatever they are. And then I think at that point we'd have to figure out if it needs to come back to this board to approve it. But what I would like to do is Brian is going to tell me what's going to happen.
Well, I think there's also the personnel department, personnel board would be involved as well. That's,
Yeah.
Okay.
That would be through HR, but it's HR and the personnel board.
Okay, so we will send it off to the other powers that be. And then we will probably it'll circle back to us at some point. So I think what would be a good result this evening would be for us to agree upon the content and the form. And if there are any minor amendments, we would make those and then pass it directly on to HR without further ado.
So
So-
I have a question about this. And first of all, I'm so grateful, I Ching, that you would do that.
I did what you suggested, which is to search out a couple of local towns similar in size and look at their
God, what a blessing.
job.
So what I see is not in here now is in the other job description, there was all these references to other duties that are for other entities other than the planning board. So ZBA, select board, town manager, town engineer, whichever. And those have all been, it appears that they're no longer in here, which means anytime that Brian spends on those activities, he's like working outside his wheelhouse. And I know the town puts a lot of pressure on Brian to work, to wear a lot of hats and be a jack of all trades. So I want to know how this job description aligns.
Sally, do you not think that those elements are in the collaborative work section of essential duties and responsibilities?
So other expertise, provide expertise to other elements of town government. And then other town boards and committees. I see. All right.
The idea is that we don't really need to enumerate every single one.
I Ching's right.
Yeah,
Thank you.
Can we just really quickly, guys, can we just, I mean, Brian, this is your role and your job description. Like, do you have any comments or any?
Sure. Yeah. Let me, a little bit of background on this. So I am very cool with this. So this was something that it was Diab, I Ching, and myself. This was not them working on something and then they said, hey, Brian, do you like this? It was, I Ching really kind of distilling what is necessary and not, and making it very clear where, the lines of communication go. And, but yeah, so I am okay with this. I think this basically gives the power still to the planning board to decide, hey, you want to go to this commission meeting or that commission, it's still in there. It's just not explicitly said, I have to go to, like, I believe the word was, I had to go to a majority of a specific board or commission. That's obviously not changing. The idea is that there's more boards and committees that could happen. Sometimes there's, maybe there's more staff that's involved, so I don't have to go to a certain meeting. So this makes it more flexible, but still, it's very clear who's that I would be doing it, and I'm acting as a liaison for the board.
Okay, thanks, Brian. That's helpful. I was going to say I think this format is far superior and is more consistent with what I'm used to seeing on a day-to-day basis. So yeah, I Ching, I think this is great, and kudos to your work. Organizing this. I think this is really succinct and a lot easier, frankly, just to track and follow. So I'm a huge fan.
Well, good. I think it's still a little bit long, but.
Yes, I apologize, I Ching. We made it longer than the 2 pages you provided.
Okay.
Brian just does too much. He does too much. We can't fit it all on 2 pages.
Yeah.
Well, maybe what we should have done is we could have put the page breaks in appropriate places so we could lose a page. And
Yeah.
we won't number these pages, Brian, so no one will know how long they actually are.
There's also 11-point type.
Yeah, it is. It certainly can't get smaller, and there's not much. There's a little bit. I mean, you can see there's a decent amount of space here at the bottom, and there's a few things that can be tightened up, but not a lot. I think the goal is 2 pages. I think we were trying at first. It was like, could we get this to 1 page? And it was like, you know what? It's actually impossible to do.
So one way you
1
do
page.
that after you change it to 11-point is you look for what in editing is called line widows. It's a line with only 1 word. And so fix it, widen the margins, make the type smaller, and get rid of widows, and you might make it work.
Looks like good work. Looks like a great job.
I know, I Ching. So good.
No, it's collaborative. Everybody did it. Or Diab and Brian.
She started it.
It's her fault. She did it.
So
Okay.
Sally, your comment about shrinking to work reminds me that is the exact opposite of what undergrads do in their essays. They decrease the margin, they increase the margins, increase the font size, and put in multiple lines per. I had someone turn in a 3-page essay which had 11 sentences in it, and it was I almost gave them an A just for ingenuity. But
Dave, don't forget Courier New font. I think it was also Courier New was like the biggest font you could possibly use.
Yeah.
Well, and so I think I probably confessed to this before, but since like about 8th grade, every teacher has written wordy on the top of my papers. That's why I know about 11-point and wide margins.
Yeah. Okay. So if are there any amendments that you'd like to make to this?
I think if everyone's cool, I think that's great. If not, meaning that you want a few more, a little bit of time, it's not like we're going to be rushing this over to HR tomorrow. So, I mean, if there are any comments or changes that you can always let me know, and I can give it to HR on Friday.
So I just have one question about minimum qualifications, which is 3 to 5 years. And whether you feel that should be more given the job.
That's a real tough one, only because I got this job with 1 year experience. so I mean, here I am 8 years late. Here I am 8 years or 9 years later, 8 years with the town. But I think what I can say is that this master's degree or related field in 3 to 5 is typical for that 15 to 30,000 population. 15,000 to 30,000 population, about 3 to 5 years. As you get to a larger city, that 3 to 5 becomes 5 to 9.
I see.
But this is totally in line. Yeah.
Okay.
What Brian is doing is a senior town planner job, and then we need a junior town planner, and this would fit. Right?
Yeah. Yeah. So I just to chime in, I think that the minimum qualification. I mean, so there's a question of if you were to hire someone right now, not at the time Brian was hired, who would you want? With the complexity of the job, I would think that considering the complexity of your job, Brian, I think you've had a very accelerated. What am I trying to say?
Trial by fire.
It's a really complicated job, and you had a really sharp learning curve. And
so part of it, it really has to do with how much money do you have to spend.
Okay.
Is really what it is.
It's the purse, not the
it's totally the purse, because that's just
so
what it
do
is.
other departments of the town lower the experience required to do the job to fit the budget that the town meeting is willing to award?
I think it's on a case-by-case basis, but I mean, as a general rule, like people are not really getting into town government jobs, because they're lucrative, right? But
they're highly mistaken.
But yeah, I mean, it really depends. It depends upon the work. I mean, so clearly, I think that there should be, and most people on here, there should be another person in the department. I mean, I think anyone can easily make that case who believes in planning, and not everybody does, honestly. People just leave everything the same. Like, what are you going to do? Nothing. And there are people in town that feel that way, but most people that understand the value of what the planning board is doing and the position feel that another person would be necessary. And I think that person would probably be, a master's degree. Like you would, it would not be a master's in 3 to 5. I don't think that's a realistic, because the reason why I say that is because whoever this second person is, this first new, second, let me start over.
Assistant town planner?
Yes, the assistant town planner. Town meeting, I would imagine, is not going to give them a master's degree in 3 to 5 years experience salary. I
Well, we
think
have
they-
a job description and we must have a pay grade associated with it because that's been on the books for 2 or 3 or 4 years.
Yeah,
now.
the pay is basically for like directly out of directly out
Okay.
of a master's, which is
Okay, I get it.
basically about 55 to 65. That's, that's what that is. So that's, I think, what we were looking for at the time. I think we might have even asked for 70 just because, but I think realistically the starting salary is probably 55 to 60,000 for someone who's straight out of a master's, which is, it's difficult obviously to pay back loans on that, but they know that going in. So I'm not trying to say anything, but that is the market. The market is
Okay.
right at a master's degree right now in planning. You are making between 55 and 65 right out of the gate
With no experience. and then-
with no experience,
yeah.
just with a master's.
Right, okay, I get it. Thank you.
Okay.
So yeah, I guess, I mean, unless everyone's fine with this at all, we won't wait and we can send it to HR, but does anyone want any more time to review? Which is totally available to you.
I had time to review. I don't have any comments. I think it looks
Great.
good.
Awesome.
Great.
If that's the case, this is easy. We can move on to the next subject.
Yeah, let's just, I would like to, I don't know what is required from HR and
I don't either,
whatever.
to be honest.
So
Just,
why don't,
I just had one comment on
Yeah.
these knowledge, skills, and abilities. Under, I'm wondering if you could put historic architectural details and structures as distinct from historic preservation. And I'm actually lifting a sentence from the Concord description, which reads, working knowledge of historic structures, understanding of architectural details, and et cetera. But I thought that could be condensed as so historic architectural details and structures could be something that the whole board can sort of pledge to get up to speed on in terms of various, if there were a pop quiz, what are the elements of a Greek revival versus High Gothic versus Queen Anne versus Italianate, et cetera.
Nick, I've been on the board for 6+ years, and I can assure you I will never remember that. So I will fail that quiz from now into perpetuity.
And Nick, I
Yeah.
went to architecture school and practiced architecture. I don't know that, and I don't think that that's relevant to this job because we're not historic preservationists solely, especially
Right. No, but having an understanding, but I actually learned all that stuff in Winchester. It was junior high school in 7th grade. And I remember how proud I felt, going to college and being able to say that we had to learn that stuff in the public school. And it does inform sort of the whole ethos of a place like Winchester. I don't know that it's, it's part of it, I think. And it would be part of it. It would be a worthy endeavor for us to eventually do okay on a pop quiz about that stuff, especially being in a place like Winchester.
Well, I think the question is this what the town planner needs to have, or is this something that other groups can provide? So, for instance, we have a design review committee, we have a historical commission, we take input from them. And so I guess from a planning perspective, there's only so much that you can put on a planner's. A planner is by I think by definition a generalist rather than a specialist, and so
That's true. I mean, it is included in the Concord description.
Yeah, but I just.
I mean, it
also
would
has
be
a
nice
very-
for everyone to have a working knowledge of that, I guess, is my point. And whether or not it's in there, it is what it is.
Nick, I would argue that we should have that idea of classical architecture is very Western centric and very steeped in history, in a Western history, whereas we are dealing with a contemporary American town and with a lot of the situations that have gone on since the classical ages of
Right, of course. No, of course, I understand that, but I think that no matter what background you come from, I think that doesn't necessarily reflect what you appreciate in terms of your whatever background you're from. And I don't know that that's a discussion you want to go down at this point.
Yeah, I would say that everyone's definition of what is historically interesting and appropriate. For me, it's mid-century modern. I don't care very much about anything that happened before then. And I take, some pleasure in what happened after. So I think that getting into, as you're right, Nick, I don't know that getting into a discussion as to which part of historic architecture is the one that we should preserve. I think we all have a desire to preserve what's worth preserving. And
right. No, and I think we'll come to it. If we work together, we'll come to the right decisions. I'm not doubting that.
If I could just say one quick thing, I agree with a lot of what's being said. Don't really disagree with hardly any of it. However, I would say that having a working knowledge of architecture and historic preservation covers those things. If the town planner, me or anyone else, has to have a working knowledge of these things, I think that covers it. So that
I understand. I thought it was worth bringing into the discussion, and that was really the only motivation for that. Sally has her hand up, but you're on mute.
So I just want to put on the table something that Diab's mentioned before. It's not on the agenda for tonight, so it's simply a reference for something to pick up from the parking lot, which is the handbook, the planning board policies and procedures, and it's a handbook. And when I look at this list of knowledge and skills, I think if we had a planning board member job description, it would at least say an interest in or a conversational understanding of, and then you would put this whole list there. Because those are the things that I personally have found the need to understand more about on the planning board. And so it just reminded me of the idea of having a planning board handbook, which is something that, given our priorities and other demands, it probably will never happen, but it's a really good idea.
We should move to that. And I agree that my one concern, Sally, is only that I know that I would never get into college today based on my experience as what I did prior to college when I was a youngster. And so when I look at all of the things I should have done, so I just am worried that if we put a list like this in front of someone and say, hey, we expect you to know all this before you become on the board.
No, I said an interest in or a conversational capacity to hold your own.
Yeah, well,
I guess I'm just happy that we're having the conversation. I mean, whatever ends up on this sheet is, but I think it's an important point.
Frankly, you would have to be interested in at least one of these to want to be on the planning board.
If I could choose one, I could do that.
Yeah.
Okay, so why don't we, I think we can, shall we just declare a consensus that this board wishes to move forward with this position description, and then we'll hand it off to Brian, who will then push it through the cranks.
Yes.
And if it pops up again for our approval, then we should not be surprised. There may be some changes, who knows. Our next, so we're now at 9:22. Trying to keep us on track. What do we do with our 8 minutes?
Well,
so we had, so there is, Brian, do you have the section of the zoning fairly readily available, which talks about this 500 square foot?
It's 9.4. Is that what it is, Brian? No.
You should be looking at it right now.
Yeah.
Do you see it?
9.5, there it is.
951A.
Yeah,
So,
so go
um,
for it.
yeah, so the issue here, for those just tuning in, if there is, if you're applying for site plan review and the expansion, the new construction is 500 square feet or less, it says here that the ZBA can waive site plan approval, provided that it finds that the impact, it would not be significant. The problem is that the Zoning Board of Appeals cannot meet outside of a public hearing, not even at a public, they only meet at public hearings for special permits, site plan review, and variances. So the idea is that they have to, someone who wants to apply for a waiver still has to go to the Zoning Board of Appeals. So what the applicant before us last was basically asking, it's supposed to be a waiver, meaning you're not supposed to get all these full set of plans together. You're supposed to get a conceptual set of plans and have, if it's 500 square less, you don't have to go through the process and have it be an administrative thing through the building department. Diab, your hand is up.
Yeah, I was going to wait for you to finish and then add that the reason I believe, and correct me if I'm wrong, that it came before us is that we are supposed to comment on the ZBA, things before the ZBA. So there's machinery that got set in place, which was not intended to for this. And
so, the biggest thing though is simply because it says that the Zoning Board of Appeals may waive the site plan approval. This was the issue in terms of why it makes it a waiver, but you still have to go through the whole process.
Right, so we can move that goal.
It's the zoning enforcement officer. Yeah, it's the
Right, the
zoning
building
enforcement officer may waive site plan review approval. The thing is, I don't know. I mean, that is one way to do it. This is something that obviously we would talk with new legal counsel about. But that is one way to do it. There's probably other ways. But the idea is to make it some type of an administrative building department situation, so it doesn't have to go to ZBA.
And this would always be appealable, just like a building permit could be appealed. So they could.
It would be a building, whatever they would. So they would apply for a building permit requesting a waiver of site plan approval, and then a building permit would be issued, and someone obviously could challenge that. I'm
sorry.
Oh, I was just. Go ahead.
To give people a sense of how big 500 square feet might be, it's like it's a large, 2-car garage or like 2 smaller rooms, right? Like this guy was trying to do a large room, which is the studio, but it's fairly big. I mean, it's 20 by 20.
It's not insignificant.
But it could be big, right? But it's not. It's not. It's like a two rooms or one giant room.
So then I have two points I wanted to make. One was, if this goes through administrative means instead of through the ZBA, do we want to have the abutters notified? Because typically you're not notified, I believe, if there's a building permit pulled. But if this is a waiver, maybe we should say maybe they should be notified. The other thing is responding to what I Ching just said is maybe we reduce 500 square feet to something smaller. Maybe 500 square feet is too big.
Well, that's not what I meant either, but I think that people who have to go through site plan approval already have really big houses, right? I mean, this is the whole thing about like reaching the 5,000 square foot limit.
It could be the fact that they've reached 3,600, 5,000, or 6,000, or you can see it could be because there's other things, not just in the residential, that would be site plan review. It's just talking about, actually, I take it back. It only is related to 4, 5, and 6. It's not, I thought it was also related to change in slope, but it's not. This,
Can you slow down about the 4, 5, 6?
Sure. So the waiver that can only be applied for is related to the construction in the residential zones that are above, like you said, above 3,600
So
in the
humongous
RG.
houses already,
No,
big houses. So adding another room, I guess, right? So
I would just, a small caveat that there are a lot of, well, not a lot, but there are plenty of 2 families that are 3,400 square feet, where, this could apply, not tons, but I would say that it's not all large houses. Certainly, anything in these 2 zones would be large houses because you can't do duplexes in either of these zones. It's really just this one, number 6 in the RG, that these are not necessarily large houses. They could be, 2 1,800 square foot house, or 2, 1,400 square feet, and then, or whatever it might be, below 36. But you're dividing that in half.
So I know that the Zoning Board of Appeals just redid all their forms, every form that they send out. And so why would this not be a form or a line requesting waiver right at the top of whatever form it is that the applicant in this case took umbrage at having to do all that work to fill out?
A form makes sense. But a form definitely makes sense, but it still would be, instead of going to the ZBA, one idea would be that it would just go to the building department, just like a building permit, and maybe it ends up getting reviewed. I mean, it certainly would always get reviewed by engineering. That's not like it will definitely get reviewed by engineering no matter what, if it's the building permit, but maybe it gets reviewed by the planning department as well. Like there's a lot of different, well, there's not a lot. There's a few ways you can do this. Diab said that, well, maybe it's more palatable if this 500 gets lower, and then we could make it administrative, meaning that if it's only 250 or 300 square feet, then it really is nothing. And then, yeah, sure, building department can do that. As it gets closer to 500, like we just said, a normal garage is 20 by 20, 400 square feet. That's the standard, can fit 2 Grand Cherokees. So that's not small. That's 2 Grand Cherokees plus a little bit more space in the front for storage and door space. I mean,
that's in an RG 6.5. That's a
it's
big chunk of your
significant in a small lot that's maybe 2,400 square feet or 4,000 square feet, which is, meaning the lot size is 4,000 square feet. So in all cases, it could be in many different cases, it could be very impactful, a 500 square foot, and in other cases, it's a nothing. And the idea is that giving that power to the building department, saying, you know what, this is too big. This does have to go to ZBA. So that's what this would potentially do, is that give the building department the option to say, and if any time the building commissioner, whoever would be this zoning enforcement officer, would feel, I don't really know, then that would be the answer. But we would be relying on an administrative process. So that
I'm wondering if they want that. I mean, do they want that? I mean, the reason you elect a board is because you've got people that are dedicated to that process.
Well, I mean, they do it every day. I mean,
and they can, the Zoning Board of Appeals, it says they can waive the site plan approval. So that's what they should do, it seems to me.
I think right now, though, the way it's written, the way that works is that it's not really a waiver. They have to go through the whole process. They have to submit a whole bunch of information that may or may not be overkill for the job. And they're saying that if you're going to offer a waiver process, I think that's what it is like if you're going to offer a waiver process,
maybe we need a waiver process that is in line with 9.5.1a instead of where what you're saying is that they have to go jump the hoops just to get the waiver, which doesn't seem to make sense.
That's the whole, and that's what I'm saying. The crux of this here is the fact that it's saying that only the ZBA can waive it. That means it has to be done at a hearing, and and the ZBA is saying that because it's being done at a hearing, you need to go through, you need to advertise in the paper.
A hearing is someone getting in front of the person. So it's either a hearing before the ZBA or it's a hearing before the administrator, and the administrator may or may not want it. They may not be qualified.
Meetings with the administrator don't require public posting and advance notice and all
It's
of that
totally,
stuff.
I mean, it's
Okay.
it's the building commissioner. It's the person who does this for a living. I mean, it's
Right.
not, it's an expert. Like,
I
I'm
think
not,
that the thing
I'm
that
not-
the applicant was upset with was that he wanted to apply to the zoning board of appeals for a waiver, but the procedure for doing so is the procedure for,
a special permit
right. And
Or
I
site plan
think
approval.
or
yeah.
site plan review. What, I
he
mean,
took
but it's
a-
the
and he
same
took
process.
umbrage at having to do all that work to request permission to not have to do all the work.
Exactly.
And so I just want to
Mm.
chime in really quickly is that this particular process is actually more work for the building department because they have to actually assemble everything, pass it on to the ZBA.
Mhm.
And if you could simply walk into the building department, show some sort of, conceptual plans and have the building and the CEO say, yeah, that's fine. That's like a 10-minute process versus a multi-month process, which requires a lot more bureaucracy. So I think
And cost, yeah.
and cost.
So your
So-
suggestion to lower the square footage sounds like a good idea.
But then we still, yeah, so I think I like where Brian was going is that by lowering the square footage and making it administrative rather than through the ZBA, so the other thing I'm thinking of is I know that the Historical Commission does have this accelerated process where they do not require the entire board to come to a decision about something, but they do actually have to, they can determine if a building is historically important or whatever they call it, and then significant, and then they can put it on the next historical meeting agenda or something like that. But it does but I don't know that the ZBA has the ability to do that because their powers come from the state. So there's a limit to what they can legally do.
I don't
Well-
want to touch this. This feels really tricky and we should wait for our council to get their feet on the ground.
I think that this might be a very good first thing to present them.
I don't know. I feel like we've got a lot of other big things to ask them about.
I think that this would be a really quick bylaw to present to town meeting in fall because it is fairly simple. It is moving whoever decides from ZBA to the permit office. And that just hearing a lot about, even through the election, I think people saying that this process of getting construction through or a renovation through your house is so cumbersome and it doesn't need to be so.
So I think a lot of people think that, but the majority of projects don't have to go through the ZBA because otherwise, I mean, we know how many projects go through the ZBA because we have those come before us. And so if you think about how many we review, I think there's a perception that it's a cumbersome process, but I think that the building permit, the building department is fairly efficient at putting things through. We do maybe 3 ZBA petitions a month,
Yeah, it's about 40 to 50 a year.
and considering how much is actually,
How many building permits are issued per year?
Thousands.
Thousands?
I mean, for everything, yeah. I mean, we're talking about additions, plumbing, electrical, everything, thousands.
Well, maybe if we just knew how many were done for additions, that would, and I don't know, maybe I just don't. I don't know.
It's yeah. I mean, I think the point is that I would agree with the fact that if you're just a regular homeowner and you have to go through this process, it's hard. Because you've never done it before. And I think a lot of it is actually stress, meaning that if you get it or if you don't get it, and a lot of the time there could be, it's just adding cost and time. I think that's the short of it, is that ZBA process, no matter what, adds time and potentially cost. Not because anything is changing or they're asking you to do anything, but it's the time portion that makes the cost more.
Correct, and construction costs increase over time.
Right, and if you're guaranteed to put an extra 3 months on, no one in their right mind would want to hear that. So that's kind of where it's coming from. But this went into the zoning bylaw as basically as a way to allow for a waiver. It's not acting in that way, and that's clear. So that's the problem. And maybe we're not, it's already past time anyway, but it's good that we had at least a first pass at this. But this is important simply because we're saying you can do this waiver, but there is no doubt it is not acting like a waiver. It either delete the whole thing because it's not doing what it's supposed to be doing, or improve it. I think that's the message.
So the person who came before us, I believe it was 450 square feet. Was it smaller than that?
It was right around 400,
Yeah.
behind their house that no one,
Yeah.
I agree with him. No one was ever going to see it.
It was actually on top of a garage, so it wasn't even changing the footprint of the house.
So
I don't think that's right. Actually, I think it was an expansion. I think it was ground level, and it was like squaring
it
off
was?
a corner. Yeah,
Okay.
but I think it's a minor point, Sally. I mean, I think it still
So-
was not consequential.
Yeah, so I guess the thing I'm not getting to very successfully is that there are obviously parts about that plan where we recognize that perhaps the 500 square feet makes sense for that particular project, as in saying, yeah, he should have gotten a waiver administratively. For other projects, 500 square feet might be too large, and we'd say, no, this should go through the ZBA. So I think the onus on us is to try to identify the criteria where we would feel comfortable saying 250 square feet or 500 square feet, administrative versus board. How do we decide what makes a project so that would have an impact on neighbors that would not require going to the ZBA versus administrative? So I think that might be a more complicated discussion.
That is a complicated discussion, but potentially worth having. It reminds me of the Historical Commission substantial demolition conversation. So there's basically or the zoning enforcement officer has to look at a building permit for an application and determine whether or not this building permit is really a substantial demolition, rather than just a renovation. And what the Historical Commission did was kind of define what a substantial demolition was in terms of math. So that part certainly made it easier to be able to do that for site plan review is possible, but would have to be creative, progressive, not the norm. But you could say, you could talk about FAR, and you could talk about building coverage, the footprint, how much of the lot is covered. Like, it's totally possible that we could do that, where we could make this administrative and give give the standards of saying, does it meet these 3 or 4 things? And if it does, then it can go through site plan review. And if it doesn't, it has to go to ZBA. So that's something that's in the quiver that we could do. That's, again, maybe it's not necessarily worth our time at the moment, but certainly worth fixing. Again, I would advise to fix this soon or delete it soon, because it is not working.
Well, we've had the one person try it, and obviously
he is not the only one since this was put in. He wasn't. I believe there's been at least 3 or 4 in the past 3 years when this was put in.
Okay.
A lot of people avoided it, and they just said, forget it. I'm just going to go to ZBA. It was less than 500, and they just went to ZBA anyway, because when it was explained to them what they had to do for the waiver, there was no difference. So they just went
same
through the
process.
Yeah, they just went through so that it didn't even matter. Like, well, why apply for the waiver if it's going to take me the same 3 months? I'll just apply for the waiver. I mean, I'll just apply for the permit or the site plan review.
Right.
So
and Brian brings up a good point. We can discuss this not ad nauseum, but ad infinitum. So why don't we table this for this evening, in the sense that we're going to bring this up at another meeting soon. I'll try to capture some of the thoughts about what we talked about. And I do recall, Brian, that the effort to come up with a partial demolition definition took multiple years. And I wasn't aware they'd actually settled 3 years. I wasn't aware they actually settled on it. I recall being in.
They did.
I
They did.
recall
No, it's
conversations with Al, which went absolutely nowhere.
they
But
they went awry for a long time.
Yeah.
And then ZBA and the Historical Commission and Al finally
Yeah.
came to something.
okay, so I would suggest that we table this. We think about maybe doing this in steps, in the sense that we know this is a complicated question. Is there something simple we can do just to provide some immediate relief, and that we feel safe? But we'll do that probably next month for sure. Next month, because we can't do it this month.
Is there a way that we can prepare for it so that we're not rehashing this whole thing again?
I guess
So
the way
some
to
of
do-
it's going to be, I don't even know how to deal with legal, meaning in terms of how, just the process of everything. There's a lot of unknown there. So probably what makes the most sense is for me to develop a
you know how
memo
we
of
were
some kind
talking about having
this.
joint meetings with other boards? Why don't we have a representative from ZBA give us their thoughts? Can we do that?
We could certainly do that. I'm certainly all about meeting with ZBA. It has not happened in the past, so I'm all about changing that.
Yeah, I think that we would not be able to meet with ZBA probably until August.
Well, we have the historical coming in on July 12th at our next meeting. We've lined that up. So a majority of the historical commission should be at our next meeting on July 12th.
So to go through the waiver right now, do they have to go through the historical commission, us, and then to the ZBA and anybody else, design review?
They are encouraged, just like any applicant, to go to
1, 2, 3, and then ultimately to the ZBA.
before they have to go to the 3 review boards. So that's why, again, you'll see that a lot of people, they just like, I'm not going to even apply for the waiver. Why would I apply for the waiver? So they just, because if you look back through, you'll definitely see things that are less than 500 square feet.
Right.
So we're going to bring this to another meeting. Brian, you bring up the fact we're meeting with historical. I'm still hoping that people will send Brian requests to be on the agenda in our discussion with historical, because I don't think
Oh,
we've gotten any.
good.
We're meeting with Jack maybe tomorrow. We're meeting with Jack this week, the chair of the historical commission,
Oh crap, that's true.
to discuss agenda.
Yeah,
So,
I don't have my calendar on me right now.
So yeah,
Sorry, so what are you looking for from us?
Yeah.
Just
Let
to
me
clarify that.
give you the wait
Ideas
time.
that
It's actually tomorrow morning, Dia. We're meeting with him tomorrow morning at 9 a.m. But we're looking for agenda ideas to potentially discuss with the historical commission.
This would be one.
The site plan review
Yeah,
waiver.
yeah.
How they feel about it? Sure.
Right.
Yeah, so we should, but if you have anything else that you think that we should discuss with historical, please let me know. We'll talk about it with Jack. We'll see what we come up with tomorrow morning with Jack. And then we can always revise the agenda. We still have a couple weeks.
Mhm.
But the idea is that we want to make sure that we have topics so that it isn't just I mean, it'd be nice if we had like a chat and had a drink or something, but that's not the way these things work. So, and then I think we are reaching out to Disability Access Committee and hopefully we'll get them in July. And then we're gonna hopefully have a discussion with the cultural district. So we're lining up meetings with other boards. So I don't know that we'll get ZBA in until August, maybe. So if we want to work on this maybe we can pull them in for a real pointed meeting on just this. But I think we might need to have a better idea of where we want to go,
Right.
so that we can frame the discussion. So Brian, if you could come up with a memo or something like that on our discussion tonight and what the possibilities are for dealing with this waiver, and have that as a starting point.
Yeah, no, I can definitely do that for our next meeting for sure, or before.
And when is our next meeting?
July 12th, 2 weeks from now. Very slight admin. I know it really is getting late. July 12th is our next meeting, and then we're meeting July 19th. Those are the only 2 meetings in July. As of right now, the executive order allowing fully remote meetings expires July 15th. So between our 2 meetings in July, we will likely get notice from the state. I'm not joking, probably July 14th at 3 p.m. or something of what is going to actually happen with that. It is likely it will continue for the summer, only because why would you force in-person meetings, or not force it? Why would you not allow remote only when, typically a lot of people go on vacation in July, just in general. So it's kind of a weird call in terms of what the state was going to do. They pushed it out, but it is, when I talked with the clerk this morning, she said it's likely that remote only will be able to continue, but no promises.
So the 2 dates you said are the 12th and the 19th?
Yeah, this was because we weren't going to meet the week of July 4th, and I was not available July 26th. So
Right, I
the
see it
majority
now.
of the
Okay.
board, wanted the 19th,
very
so
good.
that I could
Okay.
be there.
Okay, good.
So
Okay.
as soon as we find out about the July 15th deadline, I'll let everybody know.
Mhm.
But it's possible then we would have to have at least a physical presence somewhere. And the majority of the board it would be like before, where the majority of the board, at least 3 people, would have to be in person and 2 people would be able to call in.
Oh, really?
So that was allowed previously.
So,
and they
Call
did
in
so
vote-
by
there'd be a
phone.
jockeying for the spaces. I
think-
mean, it strikes me as a little bit
inequitable? Yes.
devilish.
That's the way it was prior to COVID.
Well,
is that-
yeah, the thing is, people would only call in. They would call in twice a year. They would call in once a vacation and once when they were sick. I mean, it just
Mhm.
never happened.
Okay,
with
so
COVID.
people would
Yeah.
make an effort to be there.
Oh, yeah.
There
No,
there
that
was actually someone on the ZBA who wintered in Florida who did this a lot. So,
But the majority, the thing,
Yeah,
the law
yeah.
is that the majority of the board, if it is
Yes.
in person,
the
has
quorum,
to be
the
in
quorum
person.
has to be there, yeah.
Okay, it's late.
Yes,
Okay.
let's go home.
So let us, I would welcome a motion to adjourn.
I so move.
Is there a second?
Second.
Okay, roll call vote, please. Kurt,
Aye.
Nick,
Aye.
Ching,
Aye.
Sally,
Aye.
and Diab says aye as well. We've noticed, Kurt,
Thank
the
you,
sun has gone down behind you, and you join us in darkness.
I'm in darkness. Yeah.
And thank you, Nancy.
Thank you, Nancy. Thank you to WinCam. Thank you to town planner Brian Sicali, Nancy Pocari, our recording secretary. Thank you to everyone who joined with us on Zoom and out on WinCam. And we wish you all a great evening, and we will see you in 2 weeks. Bye, everyone.
Bye,
everybody.
guys.